welcome everyone here at Emergence 21, run by Wholesale Investor, a globally like Le Mans race sport event, 24/7 in a way. I'm happy to welcome all of the participants of the European roundtable this session, and it's great to have you all here. I would probably start with some basic introductions of who is present in the session. So we have John Verzeele. John, correct me if I'm wrong in pronunciation, who is the Director of Inward Investments at Flanders Investment and Trade, based from Belgium. We have Olga Afanasyeva, Ukrainian Venture Capital and Private Equity Association. And we have Jakub Wilchelm, Head of Foreign Trade Office, based from Sydney, Australia, at Polish Investment and Trade Agency. So it's a great company. Part of us are based from Europe at the moment. Part of us are sort of streaming from Australia. I'm based in Melbourne at the moment. And I'll probably start with a kickoff question about the trends of investments, and probably like it's becoming very popular to ask what was the impact of the last year's pandemic, which kind of smoothly transitioned to this year in a way in your regions, and maybe you can describe the investment and venture capital and startup landscape in your country and region, so we have more of the outlook for participants and listeners of Emergence 21 this year. Yeah, I'll give a word to Olga, if I may, and then we'll just turn the wheel around and take it from there.
Thank you, Eugene. I knew that I will start.
Yeah, there might be.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. And that's a very important topic that we're discussing today about like the trends, what is happening here in Europe. I'm from Ukraine originally and worked there, but during the last months of pandemic, I'm staying in Italy. So I would say when I'm speaking about Europe is one Europe, but divided in certain extent into two parts. So one is the part of European Union, and the other are the other countries who are not the part of EU, but though they follow the general trends of the continent as well as the global market. So when we all stepped into pandemics in March or like early April 2020, the activity of most venture capitalists as well as business angels was a bit of like on the observing mode, because like nobody really understood, I think in every sector basically, what is happening, where is it all going, and like how shall we behave in this new circumstances when we cannot like go to the just to the office of the startup we're looking to invest in, or like have this traditional traveling and business meetings. So then started like the problems in the portfolio companies. For the next several months, the attention was focused on like sustaining portfolio companies, because though when we're talking about venture capital and in Ukraine about private equity, we're talking mostly about tech companies. So basically you're not related so much on closed borders and pandemics, but still like there are some deliveries, production in usually for Ukrainian developers is in China, for example, and also the sales are usually in United States of America. And sometimes you need to visit your like corporate clients and so on. So the next months were focused on sustaining the portfolio companies, so not so much investing in something new, but like during the recent months, what we see is like really activization of the venture capital private equity activity. Of course, most of the deals were into the companies which are related to, I think I'm shifting to the, like more sector focused answer. So it's more about health tech, like some deliveries, which are booming, I think, in all parts of the world. And we have seen some really, really good deals, both in private equity and venture capital in the market.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks a lot, Olga. And essentially, you answered all of the questions that I had, like what's happening in the region and what are the industries. So you can chill and relax for a while. Thanks a lot for that. So probably I'll, Jakub, if you don't mind, I'll pass the word over to John, because we need sort of, give this space to our European speakers today. John, what is your take on that, outcome we had last year, and what was the psychology?
Okay, a very warm welcome from Brussels, the capital of Europe. We are at the very heart of Europe, capital of European Union. It's also the capital of Belgium and the capital also of Flanders, which is the region I represent. Now, what did we see in 2020? Well, basically, overall, we withstood very well this COVID crisis. If we look at foreign direct investments in the region of Flanders, that means that we had a better outcome than expected and predicted. We went down, of course, overall. In 19, we had a record-breaking year, and compared to that year, we went down about 13 to 14% in number of investment projects and a number of direct jobs linked to that. But specifically, so why did we withstood the crisis fairly well? Basically, two main elements. First one is our very strong life sciences sector and our biotech sector. We know that pharmaceuticals and the life sciences, of course, were in the middle of the action. As you know, Pfizer is producing the vaccines in Flanders from their factory in Puurs, for instance, and we have a very big and thriving ecosystem that goes along, going from the biotech to the big pharma. So that's one key element. And we see, for instance, also in the biotech, because if we look at for instance, the total stock market value of biotech, of all public biotech companies in Europe, we have 24% in Belgium. That's the number one. That's higher than any other country. And we also saw, for instance, if we look at the capital rounds for biotech companies, they did very well last year. So that's a sector that was thriving. A second element that had a big impact is logistics. Because, of course, we saw that because of lockdowns, of course, people ordered lots of things through the homes, and e-commerce is thriving. Companies needed more warehousing space. And what added to that is also for us the Brexit. UK left European Union. We saw also this effect. Flanders is very near to the UK, of course. It's the nearest region to the UK. And so through our efficiency and logistics, our strong infrastructure, port accessibility, and so on, we saw also a lot of movement in logistics, new warehousing, and so on. So these were two sectors that played a crucial role in having still a lesser impact than most other regions as a whole. What a difference that we saw, two other elements maybe to indicate, is that usually the biggest investors in Flanders are the Americans, USA. We saw less investments from outside of Europe. We had more investments coming from neighboring countries and inside of Europe. And that's also normal because, we know that site visits and so on, those were heavily impacted, certainly from outside of Europe. So that had an impact. So that was a change. But what we also saw is that we have a big growth in R&D activities. We tripled the investments in R&D in 2020. So that's also a key element if we look at trends that we saw specifically in our region.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John, and especially for actually pointing out areas like R&D, psychology of investments inside of the markets, basically going internally in a way, especially for European Union approach. It has been a priority even before we were cut by a pandemic in a way in terms of globalization. So especially now, it seems like a very strong trend. So Jakub, I'll make it a little bit harder for you because you've been waiting, but so your answer will be probably more kind of a holistic view on what we already discussed. And given your kind of, as far as I understand, connection, both Europe, APAC in a way, are are you seeing, apart from the general question on what is the take of Polish trade and Australian trade in a way, and also, do you see any impact on international relations in terms of investments and some changed behavioral patterns of venture capital or institutional investors in the markets? You're on mute. Yeah, you're on mute.
Sorry.
I was keeping you cold for a long time. Sorry about that.
Thanks a lot for the additional questions. And starting off with the investment, it was a very, very good year for Poland and also for the region, because I can pretty much speak for the rest of the Central Eastern Europe. And when it comes to foreign direct investments, we had those flagship investments from abroad. Microsoft and Google invested $1 and $2 billion in their cloud computing services in Poland. But when we look at the VC, this is something really exciting. What happened in Poland? It was a record high, 2020. If you want to know the comparison, we had almost €500 million invested through VC in Poland, versus 295 in 2019 versus 30-40 million in previous years. So it was really, really significant. Similarly to Ukraine, second quarter slowed down, lots of foreign VC funds become a little bit reluctant. Here, the Polish funds moved in supporting startups. But in Q3 and Q4, we had quite a few mega rounds in the scale of $60 to $80 million. Really something that never happened before in Poland. And it's a pretty good case study, because the reason for that is the specific of environment. Most of the startups in Poland are actually IT companies with a strong focus on deep tech that wasn't really affected by the COVID. Another fact is the pool of talents. Poland and generally the region, if you look at Estonia, Czech Republic, Hungary, we generally score pretty high in all those indexes for tech skills, math, algorithms. So if you compare it with the shortages of talent in Western Europe, and if you combine it also with the pretty low cost of manpower, you've got the pretty good advantage. And additionally, our markets are pretty small for startups. So from day one, they're focused on global expansion. So that gives a pretty good advantage, competitive advantage for our region to overcome the pandemic or even benefit from it. So in summary, that was a really good year. And if we look at the trade, and from my observation, sitting here in beautiful Sydney, we definitely had less projects, but more quality projects that turn into a record high export activities through our office, mainly in the tech sector. It's pretty amazing that companies from Poland managed to deliver projects over $150 million in IT remotely without even a single person sitting here in Australia and New Zealand, because that was connected. So I gotta say, it was a pretty good year for our VC and startup ecosystem.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So my challenge of asking the slightly tweaked question actually made your answer even more insightful in a way. And that's kind of shows us that this quality measurement, this quality benchmark has become one of the driving forces. So those who were bold enough and smart enough to invest during uncertain Q3, Q4 and onwards, they were looking into the aspect of quality of the value chain of the company or target company or startup or business in a way. And as John mentioned that, we're looking at industries like life sciences, biotech and similar, and they all involve the technology component. And as Olga mentioned, the investment behavior was cautious, but still looking forward, what is the best avenue to investing. And then you have those two elements, whatever the core competency of the target business is, then there is a technology aspect. So I would probably proceed to the next question in that regard. What would be the ideal, the magic X factor of the target company or business or industry, venture capital or investors would look at in 21? So let's say thanks to 2020 and look into the future in a way. So Olga, what is your thinking about this magical X factor in the targeted business for investments?
Well, what an interesting question. Well, definitely investors are looking for some uniqueness. And as you were really good underlined, like in the future and actually even now, every company is becoming a technology company. Even you're not, like in IT services or the startups or sector, whatever you are doing, you're becoming a technological company because you need to automate some processes. You need maybe like something to make something autonomous, whatever it is. So this is the first point. And the second thing is that, as I said at the beginning, the investors are looking for something unique in the proposal, like some magic technological component, wherever it is. Either it's some, like trained artificial intelligence component or blockchain based or something that is unique for you. And I think what is becoming more and more important and something that we all have to look at is to have the impact component in the investments that the funds or business angels are doing. Because like we see what is happening like to these trivial things as climate change, as well as I think all these pandemics and coronavirus thing was also as one of the impacts of the climate change. So when we are making investments, we have to look at the impact that this solution or this unique product or service is making on the life of people, on inclusion, on the life on the earth. So taking care about the sustainable development goals. So apart from like uniqueness and some cool tech and like some secret sauce, I would underline as the X factor actually impact and taking care of following the SDGs in what the companies are doing and investors who are supporting these companies.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That's great. The great summary in terms of the impact and just cause and purpose of the business, not only on the sort of financial perspective, but actually probably taking some lessons of the pandemic and what might be the sustainable influence over there. John, I see you really want to take that one. So what are thoughts in the beautiful city of Brussels?
Well, if we look at it and the possibilities, our organization is heavily investing on three types of technology by hiring new people in different posts all over the world, in Europe, in the States, but also Asia Pacific and so on. And the three technologies that we focus on are health tech, digital tech, and climate tech, what we call climate tech, because we think that basically in those three areas will be the highest accelerations. Of course, digitization is everywhere, we know that, and we've seen the acceleration this year specifically. That will certainly continue, and it's basically companies that will be able to adapt to those changes that will be the winners. And so we have to focus on those fields because it's also strong fields that we have basically in Flanders, of course. That's how we see it. But together with that, we also try to tap into our own systems, what we can offer to companies. I mean, we shifted also stepping up our gears towards digitization for the whole organization by, for instance, make it possible for companies to have virtual site visits. We are working out what we call virtual tech tours for our region, so companies can really visit Flanders and the whole ecosystem on those three technologies. We don't have all of them ready yet, but we have the life sciences for the moment that will be launched in April. And so we try to combine those things and to also show to companies what is the way forward. Climate tech is, of course, also everywhere very important, and specifically also in Europe, because we have this thing called the Green Deal, where Europe wants to stimulate the investments and stimulate also the innovation for companies in the field with climate change and all of those things coming up. And we look, of course, also within those technologies to certain niches, which we think that will have important breakthroughs. To just name two, photonics is one of them, for instance. Smart materials is one of them, and so on. So we trying to focus on these kinds of technologies.
Yeah, that's climate tech. That's something interesting. I'm just wondering, what is digital tech? Because we at Fastlane Solutions, we're kind of with this heavy, complex digital arm ourselves, working with a variety of software vendors, basically like a service arm for local businesses in APAC and government as well, and startups. But then if I would tell digital tech, what would stand behind that?
Well, you have different components in the digital tech. You have all the issues around cybersecurity, for instance, which is a big challenge for companies because it's a big problem. It's an increase of cyber threats we have. So cybersecurity is important as everything is accelerating, everything is interconnected. So that's one. Another important one is, of course, the artificial intelligence and the use of it and all the possibilities. You have, of course, the use of big data, which becomes very influent in all kinds of technologies, how to use the data and the big data. These are all components that are within the field of the digital tech. And of course, also another element there is quantum computing. Lots of companies are looking into quantum computing, the next step there. That's also a field where we can say, when will there be a breakthrough for quantum computing and so on. So that's all the field of the digital tech.
Yeah, all right. Thanks a lot, John. That's amazing summary. Jakub, your take on that? You brilliantly described the value chain between APAC, Poland, and the world in a way. But what is that sort of a strong factor or profile of the companies you would look at for 21 and onwards?
Well, I definitely agree with Olga to have the uniqueness and with John to be in the right sector. But I also think that the last year showed us a very interesting pattern that venture capital will be looking at, this X factor of for companies. If I were to choose, was the agility and ability to quickly adopt. In the certain situations, and we might have more of those where really unexpected arrive. Those companies that manage to adapt quickly, they will be the winners. And this way you also diversify or decrease your risk. We have a really good example from the last year great VC round, a company called UVCA. So they're in the wellness and beauty sector. After a few successful rounds, lots of Polish people use their service to make appointments to a barber or to a manicure or a beauty salon. And then obviously when the lockdown started, the industry pretty much shut down. So UVCA, instead of trying to work in this sector, they immediately opened for other areas, from finance to things that were not really affected by the lockdown, mechanic shops for cars. And eventually, at the end of the year, they managed to raise in another series almost 60 million euro. And when the lockdown eased, they actually overperformed their level of sales from the pre-pandemic times. So
what was their pivoted adjusted value proposition back then when they changed the course? What was that after beauty and wellness? Or they stayed on the same line? They're
still in the appointment sector, but for for this time for financial institutions, I mentioned mechanic shops. For traditional pen and paper sectors, they introduced the digitalization in their app to manage appointments. So that really worked for them.
Amazing, perfect. Thanks a lot for that. And John already touched upon quantum computing and things which are very much forward and future thinking. And I've been recently talking to some of the persons who was in the beginnings of the cloud computing, essentially around 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. Now we are seeing huge proliferation of the cloud, which kind of becomes just a baseline for any business. Up to 50% of businesses are there, and then it's commoditized. It's absolutely essential for most of the accelerations out there, unless they're very air-gapped and cybersecurity paranoid in a way, I would say. All the private sector is looking at that. But then we have things like quantum computing and impact investments approach and other things. So I would probably ask, what would be the approach to a longer term view in investments? What would be the world like in 5 years? Can we even predict that after what happened last year? And what might change? Let's become a little bit of future thinkers, like with the horizon of 5 to 7 years. What might change in investment approach from your end, not from the companies we'll look at, right, as targets, and to support them in investments and make smart investments, like John mentioned. So what would be the behavior of investors, and what will change in 5 to 7 years? Olga, yeah, I know it's huge, but let's imagine we're future thinkers here. We actually are in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think, as you've mentioned, like after 2020, we cannot do this prediction for like, how do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? I think we should have stopped doing it after 2008, probably after the global financial crisis. But yeah, still, let's take our crystal balls and try to do some magic over here. I think that well, it's obvious actually that we're living in the world of huge duality, and after the pandemics and in the conditions of pandemics, this duality deepened, because from one point of view we're more accessible and other people are more accessible. Yeah, like you are in Australia, and like some of you are in Australia, some of you are in Europe, some of us. So, but we can still have this conversation. We don't need to see the person in person when we're making the investment decision. Yeah, like there already have been made some deals without people seeing each other, like in the full length of their bodies. Yeah, like just like the top part. So sometimes we don't even know whether like legs exist or this is a real person or not. Well,
just
it's kind of a joke
with half of the picture, right?
yeah, investing like in half of the founders of the founders team. Yeah, but from the other points of view, it increased it decreased the inclusion of people who don't have like a stable access to internet, for example, or like in some cases you need to travel. For some people it's still easy because they have it's more affordable for them, like even like money wise or like physically wise. But for others, it became even more hard. So this duality, in certain extent, decreased, while the accessibility increased. So it's becoming more complex in that sense. And it reminds me of when I was thinking about like which like sectors we will talk today about. So it reminded me, like, when we're going to the good restaurant and we're eating a lot of good food, is interesting. So I'm in Italy, I'm comparing to food, becoming local now. And then you, like, not you, but like usually humans, when we eat a lot during a certain period of time, we want to lose this weight. So we're like acting in the totally other way. And the same thing is with the information that we are receiving. So because there is like overload of information, and when internet appeared and social networks and all this technology that helps us consume as much information as possible, now we want to detoxicate ourselves. Yeah, that's why the subsector of mental health application or different solution is growing, and all this industry is becoming like several $billion tech sector these days, and the forecasts are just growing. So we again try to detoxify ourselves of this, like mental food. And even, like this hype application Clubhouse, I'm not a fan of it, but, like, of course, I was making some research and seeing what people are doing. And there are a lot of, like rooms, not for conversation, but for just silent observation or silent meditation altogether. So I think what will drive this industry, like of venture capital and private equity, as well as tech sector, will be dealing with probably decreasing this duality of the current world that we're spying at this certain point of time and during the last years as well.
So we may in a way say that a pandemic kind of made world more black and white on where we should look at what are the really important things. So we're all technology based now. There is no other way. But then when we kind of all absorb the technology in the variety of ways, we kind of thinking what's really important, because technology becomes a vehicle to deliver some value, just as a baseline. So John, you're thinking, you're in the middle of the old world of Europe. What is your experience thought on that?
Okay. Yes. Well, I think when we look at it, I think that the main drivers for international tech projects will still be need to accelerate innovation. That will still be there. Companies will still look at gaining from ecosystems around the world. They still want to enter international markets, but there are two new trends that are happening due to COVID, I think. But I don't know if they are there to stay. And the two new trends are, first of all, the risk-resilient manufacturing footprint. So companies are looking into that because we've seen the consequences of a crisis like this happening. And a second thing is that companies are looking to shorten global value chains. So they are more looking to regional production and so on, because we've seen the problems with the bigger value chains. They're under pressure. And these are two trends that we are now seeing. We were talking about reshoring production and so on into Europe again. So these two trends. But there's one question mark for me in there. If we see this trend nowadays, will this last or not? Because basically, at the end of the line, it all comes about costs also. If you have a business, you have to look into, is it possible from an economical point of view? And we all know global world, we have the manufacturing in low-cost countries and so on. So the fact of changing or trying to change that is not so easy. I think that in the end, probably the cost elements will still gain and become more important again. The thing is, of course, that by time, and if we look at 5 years ahead, we will have a big progress again on the technology point of view, and more things are possible, of course, from home or from different locations. So it's very interesting to see how these two things will interfere, I think, and that's the big challenge there. We see, and these are a number of trends that are still a question mark to me, I must say.
Yeah, that's actually I appreciate being honest here, because essentially we, and like Olga said, we can't really predict after that huge change of the course. There are some things which accelerated in technology, but there are some things which were sort of inclined to drastically change, like the shortened value chains and different approach to globalization of supply and demand in a way. So yeah, Jakub, any thoughts on that from Sydney?
Yeah, I agree with you guys that this last year created this very unprecedented scenario for the future. It's actually interesting to compare reports from last year that were predicting the future, and this year's report post or during the pandemic. There's many things stayed the same. There's similar trends, and obviously the tech will be going forward. But if we look at the 5-year perspective or even further, I think we received few additional perspectives for the near future. One thing is a focus on health, and we actually pre-pandemic times 1/4 of VC funds in Poland invested in medtech startups, but the pandemic it intensified that. The idea of remote doctor visits, the telehealth, the remote diagnostics, it'll all be changing in the course of the next 5 years. But I'd say there's something that really we will really feel in the next 5 years in the investment world, and also individually. This is what John mentioned before. It's the Green Deal. It's something that in the previous years, countries would create strategies, from hydrogen strategies to big energy strategies. But I think in the next 5 years will be crucial to execute them and commercialize them. And I'm not only talking about EV renewables, but I'm also talking about a market that is emerging in conservation, biodiversity. We actually experienced last year a cleaner air. We experienced a different reality, and I think that many technologies emerged very, very quickly, and we will be focusing in the next 5 years on cleaner water, on forest conservation. I'm not sure if I give you the right number, but I think Microsoft recently invested $100 million in carbon capture certificates. This is a big change, and we'll see that trend. And I think this will become a big business and big opportunity for investors. And one thing I would like to add from the investors' point of view, in 2020, in so many regions, unexpectedly, innovations were created. So from those obvious hotspots, such as the Silicon Valley, I think the investors will be looking further. We'll be looking at Southeast Asia, China, that becomes from a copycat country to innovators. Central Eastern Europe is also a good examples where technologies emerge. So I think the next 5 years will be really speed up in many areas. The large infrastructure projects we've got here in Sydney, the mega city, 1.5 million in the next decade. The new smart city is arising together with an air component. Similar project in Poland. And one thing I will agree with you, John and Olga, it will be full of surprises and unprecedented scenarios in the post-pandemic times. So yeah, we'll really see.
Yeah, that's a lot to come, and a lot of things happening behind your window, Jakub. Like the whole smart city is sort of rising there.
And
so yeah, just
technologies that come into that, from smart city, AI, pretty much everything that you combine in the tech sector will play a significant role in those mega infrastructure projects.
Yeah, that's actually huge, and the changes are happening as we speak in a way, and the adaptability component you mentioned before becomes very essential, and still the driving forces for all of the parties involved, all the stakeholders involved are still, founders of the companies, investor, C-suite level of investment companies who make decisions. And literally, I can give an example of this session we have today. Last year, I was in Sydney Hilton for the same conference, but which was called Emergence 2020. Now, Emergence 21 is in this format. And what about us? What about humans in all these huge things we've just discussed? So I'll probably just give all of you a minute or so to wrap it up and think about what is human being at the core of what's actually happening, or we launch something huge that's eventually may go beyond our control. I know that's a very philosophical question, but what will be the position of us decision makers in this year to come and the next horizon? And yeah, what about the human in the center of it all? Are we making those decisions for human being and making the life on the planet better and the well-being on the planet better? Yeah, let's probably come to Olga. I know Olga likes the topic apparently from what she's been saying. So yeah, just being cautious of time, probably a little bit on that, like striking, killing, nailing arguments.
Thank you, Eugene. I also like to be the first answering the question, so I'm like a little bit more under stress, but it's fine.
No worries.
Yeah, if we're talking about the future and the role of humans, I think our role will stay as human as possible, like even more human, as we can say. And I like to stress that one of the most important languages of the future will be not so much the language of like coding and like language of programming, but the language of compassion. So the future of humans, as well as the future of jobs, will be in the intersection of enabling technologies to be more like with a human touch. Sorry for repeating this word so much in my sentence, but I cannot avoid it. So yeah, this would be my answer for the future.
Yeah, amazing. We're still a little bit egocentristic on this planet, and we're responsible. At the same time, we're very responsible for what's happening with all of our inventions, innovations, and technologies. So the impact and the climate and all of those things. John, what is your thinking?
Yeah, well, of course, humans should always be central, and all the technologies and all the algorithms and so on. Okay, they should be there to support the human beings. But there is a danger, I think, that, in some way they take over in the decision making, because, the more sophisticated all those technologies become, the more difficult it is for humans to understand what lies beneath it or behind it. And so, it's a question of a balance also. But we must stress that, of course, this whole thing with technologies has given the possibility to companies and startups also to have a kind of democratization of the process of innovation, because they have a smoother access to open source software, cloud infrastructure apps, powerful programming languages, and so on. So it opens up the possibilities. It's endless possibilities that we have. But still, the human element is very important, and this should also be taken into account when we look at the reglementation and the rule of law and so on, and to have the balance and the focus on the human beings as well.
Yeah, this is why we need compliance, but still compliance and automation of compliance, it becomes also pretty cumbersome. The business in itself, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, Jakub, what is your thinking on ourselves in this world?
I gotta tell you, seeing what's going on in the world, seeing on not only the technology but also the way we think. I sometimes get optimistic, that there's more and more idea for the sustainable future, for sustainable business, and for the sustainable world. And if you look at the trends nowadays, the investment, and this conference is about it, is really focusing on sustainability that pretty much equals to a better use of world's resources, and eventually to a better condition for our life. We in the recent years we have identified those areas that can disturb the development of our planet, and that affects our individual life. So I think this is a good thing that is happening, that there's a massive stress and focus on making our life better, and putting a human in the center of it, and thinking about humans' future, and how the technology, business, and many other areas will impact our humanity.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think the vibe of this conversation itself actually demonstrates that, we have this European roundtable run with European guests, and with guests from Australia with apparently European touch or background, and we share the same thinking, despite all of the chasms and challenges brought to us by 2020 and all of the outcomes from that. So it seems like we are wrapping up at a very positive note about it, and technology still allows us to have the conversation in that way. And I'm very thankful for all of your inputs. I think they are on one hand, they were very forward and future thinking. On the other hand, there were a lot of good points about the focus at the moment and the outcomes of the past. So yeah, I think this session has just now become an artifact of the visitors and audience and other companies present at Emergence 21. Thanks everyone, and have a great day or evening in Australia. And thanks a lot.